In Module 2, we're going to be talking about some of the current challenges faced by law enforcement, and this module will examine some of the strategies that are being employed for proactive policing rather than simply reactive. This is a term that began in the 1970s in law enforcement. Too often law enforcement, even today, as we face diminished budgets or reduced numbers of officers, we find that we are more reactive in our nature than proactive. There is less time for unobligated patrol time, for instance, because officers are running from call to call. The criminal investigative analysis process increases the success, the quality, and the speed of the investigative and therefore the judicial process. A crime scene to courtroom kind of concept. Further application of these processes in the course will aid in communication efforts and help thousands of agencies across America as they begin to get better at communication, cooperation, and coordination. There are some interesting challenges that we face in America. These numbers are based on an average of about the last 20 years based on FBI numbers. The number of missing people in the United States each year is approximately 103,840 people. These are people who disappear from their homes and are never heard of again. This does not include the guy who gets mad at his family and goes off to Las Vegas for a few days drinking and gambling and later returns home. These are bona fide missing person cases where these people never return. Alarmingly, in the United States, we recover 3,884 unidentified bodies. To my best understanding, these are not identified as those people within the missing persons, although they could certainly fit within that category. And then finally, we average about 15 to 20,000 homicides per year in the United States. Let's take this number and think a little bit about what's happened in the United States in the last 40 to 50 years. In the 1960s, America's police officers were solving approximately 90% of all violent crime. By 1990, our effectiveness had dropped to 70%. And according to USA Today, in 2002, we were solving approximately 65% of all violent crime. The question very clearly is why? And there are a number of reasons. The sophistication of crime has changed. The internet and the ability to virtually commit crime has changed some of these numbers. But before even the increases we've seen in the last 10 years in internet fraud and forgery and abuse, in the kinds of crime that we're dealing with from a cyber perspective, we saw something very interesting happen. We saw the very fabric of America change with the way in which people move around. In the 1960s, after Disneyland became a new and wonderful place for families to go, it took nearly 2 days for members of my family to travel from the Salt Lake City area to Southern California to enjoy Disneyland. Today, I can jump on a plane and be there in an hour. Now, the relevance of this is that in the 1960s, everyone in a community knew when an individual was in a neighborhood selling, for instance, Fuller brushes. Today, salespeople travel from one location to another and travel so rapidly, and yet law enforcement continues to look at crime as a geographically based issue. To summarize that, in effect, I could travel to Los Angeles today, commit a crime, a robbery, or a sexual assault, be on an airplane and back home in Salt Lake City eating dinner this evening, and local law enforcement officers in California would be looking at criminals in the area as potential suspects in the case. This may be one reason why But regardless, we're seeing a dramatic change in our ability to solve crimes. So if we were to look at this and just simply do some math, let's take those numbers that we talked about earlier, but even look at it at 10%. Out of the missing persons in the world, or in the United States each year, let's say that 10,384 of those people really remain missing. Let's just go crazy and say 90% of those missing persons return home. That's still 10,384 people that are unaccounted for. Then let's add the 3,800 unidentified bodies and the 15,000 roughly homicides that occur. This leaves us 29,000 crimes that need to have criminal work done on. Now let's look at the demands we've talked about earlier about decreases in budget, decreases in personnel, increases in calls for service. We have to become better at what we do. This number here, 10,384, is alarming. This is the size of some cities in America completely being wiped out by those people disappearing. So there are some strategies that we can do to combat the problem. We can look at this idea of criminal investigative analysis. We can look at improving our crime analysis processes in police departments. We can look at things like intelligence infusion centers and real-time crime centers. In violent crime, we have programs like the FBI's VICAP program, the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, that looks at unsolved homicides, missing persons, and unidentified bodies. The FBI VICAP program also looks at bizarre sexual assaults. One thing is clear, there are programs out there that are successful in helping us, and it is incumbent upon us in government and those of you who will be the thought leaders for the future to look at how we can best bring together different organizations to solve crime. And of course, we need to rely on and improve those state and local initiatives. I hope this gives you a nice jump start into Module 2, and we'll see you on Module 3.